So hello everybody and welcome to the final astrological and energy update of 2024. So in this video I am going to touch a little bit, so I'm going to do the astrological and the energetic weather for this week, and then also a little bit of next week, and I'll be taking some time off over Christmas and I'll be back to normal videos on the 6th of January. So this will be a little bit longer than the usual videos because we're going to get into the new moon, which is going to be happening next week. And a couple of other little bits as well. So let's dive in. So this week is a really interesting week. So we're coming off the back of the winter solstice, which is a really, really lovely new beginning point. This is really the seeding point of 2025, essentially. So that is really kind of like the new beginning where energy is very dark, inward and quiet, and we're still in that energy, and we will be for another couple of days. So again, really, really good time to set intentions, get clear, get quiet, get still, really listen to what the whispers of your soul are guiding you towards. When there's less energy around, we're more able to hear like our intuition, our like the deepest desires. There's less noise, therefore we can kind of get in touch with that deep part of ourselves that knows, that can be your compass without that conditioning, what you think you should be doing, all those other bits. So even though we are really coming off the back of that, it's very, very still inward energy. There's a lot this week of setting us up. So it's kind of like energy that's layering on top of this, which is creating lots of different new beginnings, lots of different new chapters, milestones, etc. And we're going to be really breaking that down in this video. So what's interesting about this time of year is often our like cultural way of like beginning the new year can really be a little bit of a mismatch to the energy that is actually calling us inward, going very still. But there is a little bit of energy that's kind of supporting that new year, new me 2025 kind of energy. So there might be a little bit of a sense of this week of wanting to leap into action, wanting to kind of getting ready for those like 2025 new intentions, going head first, really kind of detoxing, all those little bits where it's an interesting one because there is a transit that's happening that might be giving you that feeling, but it's your conditioning that will kind of make you throw yourself into that and go, hell for leather, like a lot of people do in January, and then often bounce back. So there's an interesting one this week where there's energy building and they might feel that sense of like wanting to move forward. However, it is still winter, and I think that it's so important to be mindful at this time of rest, nourishment, being quiet, laying that strong foundation so we can start 2025 off really strong and well, and have the energy to see you through the rest of the year, so we're not faltering at the beginning or just a couple months in when we've not given ourselves the time to lay the foundation, give ourselves the reserve and the energy we need to kind of sustain ourselves throughout the year. So we've got the Jupiter Saturn waxing square, which is interesting. It's a little kind of bringing up themes that began in 2020. So there might be a little bit of an echo, and it's going to be a really, really interesting transit, which I'll unpack for you in a minute. It feels like concrete progress. It's a checking in point. It's a choice point. It feels like things are moving on, and it's almost like the next chapter in something that was seeded in 2020. We are in the waning moon phase as well. So again, we've got that first waxing square of the Jupiter Saturn conjunction that happened back in 2020. So that's kind of like first waxing squares are often where action happens, right? So we've got the action energy, and then we also have this inward energy of the solstice, the waning moon, which is going quieter and stiller and deeper, more towards that new moon. But then we have the new moon in Capricorn, and that is coming up at the end of the week, and that is all about kind of laying the foundations, setting new intentions. So there's still that newness around, but again, it's paying attention to that energy that's drawing you inward, as well as sort of the energy that might be pushing you outward as well. Okay, so let's dive in. So the first major transit we have this week is Tuesday, the 24th of December, and that is where Jupiter in Gemini squares Saturn in Pisces. Now, with like more outer planets, when they have a conjunction, which is when they come together in a sign and they're exactly, conjunct on top of each other, then we have, it's almost like acts like a new moon. So that a new moon happens when the sun and the moon are like on top of each other, technically in the zodiac, and they can join together, and that's what creates a new beginning, right? So, and then we have the first quarter moon, the full moon, the waning square, and then we have the new moon again, and that begins a cycle. So not only do we have that with a moon cycle, but we also have that with different outer planet transits as well. So a lot of you who are into astrology probably remember this, the great conjunction, everybody called it, which was the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that happened in December of 2020. And that's when those two planets came together, and that was the first time that that happened in an air sign for 200 years. So it kind of ushered in a new era. So it was very, very significant at the time. It was very, very big, but we're coming up to that first square that we have now. We've had one already this year. This is the second square, and then we'll have a final square, which I think is happening in 2025 at some point as well. So this is kind of like a little bit of a midpoint on the journey. But essentially, what is really can be really, really helpful is to be thinking back to anything that was happening around like that November, December, January time of 2020. What began there, and where has it taken you? What journey have you been on over the last 4 years? Because this is like the new moon point, that's where things are seeded, that's where things begin, right? And then as we move towards that first waxing square, that is where energy is building throughout that first quarter of a cycle. So, you know, first it's an idea, then the shoots start to show just like they do at Imbolc, and then we kind of come to the spring equinox, and that's really the archetypal energy of the cycle. We're in the spring phase now, and this is where things are coming to fruition, and they're starting to show, right? So it's new life. So it's a really helpful time to check in on what was happening in your life at that point, because we can start to see, okay, like what foundations have I laid? What's been happening in my life up until this point, and where do I go from here? So it is a square as well, which is interesting. So again, squares, they are points of tension, and friction is what creates growth, right? So that is also an interesting thing, because when we're having those first waxing squares, it might bring a little bit of tension, and it's almost like a crossroads, and you get to choose now where you're going to go and how you're going to step into this new chapter of your journey, whatever was started in the winter of 2020. So the next chapter in this will be the opposition. So that's like the full moon, and that's really where it comes into its fullest expression. So whatever was seeded in 2020 and 2028, that's really where you're going to see the fullest manifestation of whatever began at that point. So this square is almost like a halfway point, or a quarter way point really, on the whole journey, but it's halfway between that. So we're kind of at the point where we had the idea, things are now in the action phase, and then we're going to build energy. We'll continue to build towards that, almost like that full moon phase, which will happen in 2028. So again, you know, whenever we have significant milestones in journeys and in cycles like that, there's always an opportunity to check in and make a choice of where you're going to direct your energy. And what's interesting with Saturn Jupiter squares, Jupiter wants to expand. It desires freedom. Jupiter in Gemini, which is where it is now, it's all about curiosity. And then Saturn is about responsibilities and limits, and like being realistic, whereas Jupiter doesn't care about being realistic or the details. It just wants to just grow and expand and make things bigger. So when we have a square with these two planets, it's quite interesting, because there's almost like this need and want for growth, but then also like a bit of realism that's coming up to. So you might be experiencing a little bit of tension in whatever areas of life this is showing up for you. So this first conjunction happened in Aquarius, and this second part of the journey is happening in Gemini and Pisces. So it's really, really worth having a look at your own personal birth chart and understanding where those signs fall in your chart, and what house those signs fall in your chart, because that will give you an indication of the areas of life that this has began in, and then also will continue in. So this is, again, it's a bit of a choice. It's a bit of a choice point now. When we get to that first spring phase, this is really where something's coming into its full form or coming into structure. The new moon is the ideas phase. The Imbolc, which is halfway between the first quarter of something and the new moon point, the waxing crescent phase, that's really where like the shoots start to show, and there's beginning and there's stirring in the earth, and that's really where stuff begins, but the actual action point is now, right? So again, like refining, reviewing, getting clear on where you want to go over these next 4 years and what direction you want to move in. This is a fantastic time to review, and that's really perfectly in line with with this, you know, the 2025, the solstice, the new beginning, the new moon we have coming up at the end of the week. So, you know, there's lots of energy around at the moment, which is kind of inviting you not just to make a plan, but make a long-term plan. So we have this every year with Capricorn season anyway. Capricorn season wants us to look ahead, make the long-term plans, be responsible. But this transit is kind of emphasizing that even more. So again, that's kind of happening around Christmas Eve, the 24th. And then on Thursday, the 26th of December, when these planets are still in that square, not exact, but they are still in that square, the Mercury in Sagittarius is gonna oppose Jupiter and square Gemini, square Saturn in Pisces. So it's creating a T square across the zodiac. So when Mercury comes into this T square, it's going to kind of spark conversations around these themes. Mercury is the planet of the mind and communication. So you might start to notice themes like this. It's a great time to reflect around Christmas Eve, but I guess the choice points and solidifying things, that's all going to start coming to the surface around the 26th. So, you know, pay attention to the conversations that are coming up that day. Pay attention to what you're called to talk about, what you're called to communicate about, what you're thinking, because there's something here and it might cause a little bit of tension. However, it's pushing you into this next chapter, this next milestone, and whatever journey it is that began in 2020. This can bring, again, a little bit of tension because Jupiter wants to grow and expand. Mercury in Sagittarius is about adventure, exploration. And then we have the square from Saturn in Pisces, which restricts responsibility. Saturn says no. So there definitely will be some tension there, or there may be some tension coming up there around freedom, exploration, and also what's real and where there are limits to things. And again, it's not that the limits are bad and the freedom and adventure is good. Actually, the limits and the realism could be what keeps a lid and structure to that freedom and adventure, so it doesn't get out of hand, so it doesn't go too far, so it actually has meaning and purpose, and it's not just frivolous, floating around having a great time but not actually kind of achieving anything or moving things forward. So these tension points are never bad. They're always about teaching you a lesson. There's something to learn there, and that's where you can create balance, grow, and actually move things forward in a sustainable way. So the next transit I'd like to talk about coming up this week is we have Venus in Aquarius squaring Uranus in Taurus. So Venus is pretty unconventional in Aquarius. Venus is the planet of relationships, and Aquarius is the planet of Aquarius is the sign of things being out there and quirky and different and a little bit offbeat. It's futuristic, so it's almost like 20-30 years ahead of where everybody else is. So it's kind of always seen as a little bit strange or aloof. And with this square to Uranus, it could bring some tension in relationships. Uranus squares as well can bring sudden changes. It can bring shocks, surprises. It can just kind of create a little bit of an earthquake. And with this being in Taurus, which is quite like, it's fixed earth, right? It's about traditions. It's about keeping things the same. And then Aquarius is about shaking things up. It's ruled by Uranus Aquarius in modern astrology. So it's about changes, it's about earthquakes, it's about just like being rebellious. So I think it's interesting that this transit is happening. I feel like it can bring a bit of tension around like the traditional and the tension around what's traditional and what's unconventional, and maybe that could come up in relationships, particularly over Christmas and the holiday period with families. But I would really, really invite people to have a look at where this falls in their chart as well, because and especially if you've got any planets or points, significant planets or points in because this might be affecting you a lot more personally. The fixed sign being Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. So when there are like significant transits happening in fixed signs and you've got a lot of fixed sign energy, these transits can affect you a lot more personally as well. So definitely one just to keep an eye out. And if you are experiencing any tension in relationships, if you're noticing that there is a bit of friction there, again, the friction is the opportunity for growth, and it's there for a reason. It's not there to just like F shit up for the sake of it. Like, it's there because it wants to support growth and you stepping into a new phase and a new chapter. So, you know, pay attention to what comes up because it's there for a reason. Something is coming up because it wants to push you in a certain direction, or maybe it's a helpful day to have like a more maybe open or difficult conversations. But if you're mindful of that and you understand that going into this phase and you're aware of what could come up, then actually you can have you can be conscious and mindful of it, and you can get the most out of those conversations. But clear communication is really important. Also being aware, because Uranus can be destabilizing, people might feel a little bit triggered or kind of knocked by this energy. So if you have brought something that is a bit new and unconventional into a family situation or a relationship, then it's not being received well. Even just being compassionate and knowing that Uranus energy can be really destabilizing, full stop. And if you've kind of brought that into fixed sign energy, it could be something that is a little bit triggering to people. So also just be compassionate and know that there is potential for that around the 27th of December. And then moving into the end of the week / next week. So on Sunday, the 29th of December, we have Chiron stationing direct. So Chiron moves pretty slowly through signs. So Chiron's been in Aries for a while. Can't really tell you exactly when, but it's been there for quite a long time. So when planets, so it's stationing direct, so it's going to be moving forward again. It's been moving backwards. It's been retrograde for an extended period of time. And when Chiron is retrograde, that's really when the healing journey turns inward. So Chiron is an asteroid, which it's the archetype of the wounded healer. So Chiron is like our wounds. It's where we have things that we need to heal, and then we become so good at healing them that we then are able to help other people with whatever it is that they're struggling with, the wounded healer. So when Chiron is retrograde, that is really like an inward healing journey, and it becomes like the moving forward periods for Chiron are almost like the integration. We're taking action, we're being a bit more outward, we're implementing things that we've learned. Whereas when it's retrograde, it's almost like that's when things go inward, and it's more of like, okay, reviewing the past, understanding, refining, knowing what's there, excavating. It can be a great time to start looking back. And then when Chiron stations, which is when it goes still and then begins moving forward again, that's really where when a planet stations, either retrograde or direct, it stops, right? It stops and then it moves in a different direction to whatever direction it was moving in. So when we have those periods of time where a planet stops, it becomes a lot more emphasized for a brief period of time, for a couple of days. So depending on where you have Aries in your chart, which is where Chiron's been for a long time, that is really where you might kind of see themes come up. So if you had Aries on the second house of finances, then you might be someone who is being pushed towards financial independence, but you also might have a lot of wounds around that you need to heal if Chiron is moving through that area of your chart. So when we have that station in Chiron, when we have Chiron stationing in that sign, that might be almost like a milestone in your journey. Might be where those themes that are kind of like happening in the background, have been for a while, come to the surface or become more prominent or obvious. So like Aries energy is focused on Chiron in Aries can be being very focused on the self-healing journey. Aries is the self. It can be integrating themes of independence, self-courage, individuality. Out of balance Aries energy, that can be wounded Aries energy, can be selfishness, anger, aggression, diving in, not thinking things through. I think like the motto for Aries energy is like ready, shoot, aim. It's like just go for it. And it's ruled by the warrior, right? So like if you think of a warrior, if it thinks before it charges into battle, it's probably going to find that really hard. So Aries is it's the entrepreneur. It just starts without knowing what the outcome is going to be. So that's not a bad thing. But when the energy is out of balance, it can be reckless, right? So again, it can bring up themes around that time, and it really depends where this is falling in your chart. Because if you have Aries in your 7th house of relationships, maybe you have a partner that's expressing that energy, and you've got some wounds around that being destabilizing for you, triggering. So it could be happening in your 8th house, which is the house of taxes and death and inheritance and all of those things. So depending on where this falls can really determine how it's going to express in your life. It doesn't always hit you personally. It can be, if you have it in the 3rd house of siblings, you could be experiencing a healing journey through your sibling that's expressing this energy. So there's lots and lots of different ways that our like energy can manifest, but this is really a period of time where we've gone from a very inward, quieter, more introspective period of healing to, okay, what are we going to do about it now? Like, the review period has happened, and now we're putting things into action and we're moving on, right? So this is really a period of time where it's an opportunity for you to step into a new phase of this. Be like, right, okay, we've learned the lessons, we've understood. Now let's actually put it into action and, you know, take the steps forward. So again, not a huge transit because it has been, you know, doing this in Aries for a while, going back and forth Chiron. However, because of the station, things might become heightened at this time, and it might be things that have been happening in your life for a little while, but it's really cool, good to be mindful of, that it might bring things to the surface, and actually it's just because you're moving into a new phase of integration. And then Monday, the 30th of December, we have the new moon in Capricorn. So this is really nice, actually, because, you know, we don't always have new moons around, like very, very close to New Year's Eve. So again, like, it's the energy this year is kind of lining up with our Gregorian calendar quite well. So new moons in Capricorn. Capricorn is a cardinal earth sign. So Capricorn cardinal begins things, right? So we have Aries, that's the starter flame of the zodiac, it's the spark that begins the fire. We have cardinal water, which is Cancer, which is like the waters where life are created, right? So with cardinal earth, this is really where, you know, things begin to come into physical manifestation. But Capricorn is, it's the long game. It's the goat that climbs the mountain. So it lays the strong foundation so empires can be built on top of it. Capricorn is ambitious. It values the long game. It's forward thinking. It's traditional. A lot of Capricorn people, you'll see them kind of just being absolute forces and just keep going and keep going. There's often a lot of consistency with Capricorn energy. So it lays a foundation and it begins the physical manifestation of things in the material world. So new moons are a new beginning and a seeding point, and it is aligning with that new year this year. So, you know, again, all new moons are a great time to set intentions. Capricorn new moons are particularly helpful because not only does it want it, like, it wants us to plan. Capricorn values a plan. So it's not a time to burst into action, though, and this is what I was saying before. So, you know, we've had the new beginning with the solstice. We've got this Capricorn new moon beginning. We're stepping into this new chapter with the Jupiter Saturn first waxing square. So there's all this newness. There's all this transitionary energy. There's all of this, like, they're real choice and pivot points, right? Of like, okay, now we're moving in. And I think that because there's that newness, our conditioning often tells us, let's get stuck in. Okay, like, new year, new me, let's go do the detox, let's do the diet, let's like completely change things. And winter is not a time for change. Winter is a time to be inward and still. So, you know, this is a great time to create a practical step-by-step long-term plan. It can be an amazing way to work with this energy. It is about you know, it's about laying the foundation well, because when we have a strong foundation of peace, of well-being, of strength, then that's when we have the energy to continue things throughout the whole year. So Capricorn is like, Saturn is the planet of long-term things. Like, it values putting in the work, but it's not about bursting forward and changing everything overnight. It's about doing things slowly, steady, consistently. And I see this with a lot of my coaching clients as well, and I say this to a lot of them, is like my clients that I speak to on a daily basis, when I see a transformation in a client that happens really quickly and overnight, I'm always worried because I know that the bounce back is coming. But when I see clients like layering in really, really slowly and building a slow, solid, consistent foundation, I know that they're the changes that are going to last, even when they seem really, really stupid and small in the beginning. So this is a real invitation here to just watch your conditioning, because there will be that sense of wanting to push forward and taking action and, you know, start the new business, start the diet, start the exercise regime, all in the period of time of winter where everything is calling you inwards, where your energy wants to hibernate. It doesn't want to be out there doing stuff. It's a complete mismatch to the energy that you have that's supporting you. We are a huge part of these energetic cycles, and when we go against them, that's often where we experience frustration, because we're not necessarily aligned. So there's always that there will be a bit of a, you know, you might not necessarily have the energy. You're like, why can't I be consistent? What's wrong with me, right? That creates negative conditioning. You create a story, and then you keep living out that story. And I see this in clients all the time. So be mindful of that, and give yourself a bit of a break. If you put the work in now by eating well, getting enough sleep, nurturing and nourishing these dreams and intentions. It's not about not being intentional. You can like rest as an active process. So being active and actively taking care of yourself, nourishing yourself, actively laying a strong foundation for whatever it is you're going to be building in 2025 is an incredible thing to do at this time. And that Capricorn energy will support you in doing that. But it doesn't need to be these big drastic changes and these huge there's a word that I'm looking for there, but I can't find it. And I keep trying to find it recently. I need to sit and like journal on this, but it's yeah, like you're not trying to completely change things overnight and make these big like showy moves, right? We're here to play the long game, and that's really what this new moon phase is all about. So also the moon in Capricorn is in its detriment, so it's furthest away from its home sign of Cancer. Capricorn is cold, practical, and Cancer is watery, emotionally intelligent. There's a warmth to Cancer energy. So again, just being mindful of that. Like there might be a like when we have new moons in Capricorn, they are a bit colder and more practical, and sometimes that can make us maybe not necessarily pay attention to the emotional aspect of things as well. So just something to be mindful of as well, when you, especially when you're setting intentions, is you might be more naturally pulled more towards the Capricorn long-term planningness, and there might be something a bit more cold about that energy. So just try and kind of bring a bit of balance in there with that Capricorn, with the Cancer energy, just being a bit more mindful of like, okay, well, how will that make me feel? You know, like what kind of, like dropping into your intuition a little bit more, like those sorts of things will just help keep that balance, particularly if you're very like practical, yang, strong-minded, because that energy will really kind of keep you pushing forward, and it's all about balance with this sort of stuff. So I think that's everything I wanted to touch on this week. So again, as I mentioned before, I'll be taking a little bit of time off, so I'll be back to my normal schedule of videos from the 6th of Jan. So that's why I wanted to mention that Capricorn new moon in this this video. So also, if anyone wants to get a New Year's reading booked in with me, then I'm doing a 20% off offer for the whole of January. So if you type in winter solstice, all capital letters 2024 on the readings booking page, then you get 20% off. So do book one in if you're curious. This is always my busiest time of year for readings, because people like to really kind of get a tone for the year, kind of start the year well, and lay that foundation. And it's a really, really perfect time to do that, or around birthdays as well. It can be a really, really nice time. So yes, thank you all for joining me. I hope you have a lovely holiday season, and I will catch up with you all in 2025. Lots of love. Bye.